Hey everybody, welcome back to another Q&A on September 6th, 2022. So we're getting into the fourth quarter. See, I don't even know. We have some questions. So I was curious your thoughts on the risk versus reward of trying to manipulate carbs, fat, sodium, and water during peak week. Do you feel if a competitor is on stage, is in stage condition 2 to 3 weeks out, it would make sense to increase food into the show and keep fluids and electrolytes stable? So it's kind of two questions. I mean, maybe it's one, but if the context is that they're ready 2 to 3 weeks out, then the answer is going to be probably yes. I mean, that's plenty of time to fill someone out pretty subtly without really manipulating anything. Show up, put your tan on, call it a day. I mean, that's a great position to be in. So I would say if that is the case, then absolutely. I mean, change as few variables as possible. Reduce fatigue. You say increase food, but also reducing fatigue. So depending on how much cardio is in there, depending on what training looks like, manipulate activity, reduce fatigue. That's going to help drop some of that inflammation. That's also going to lower caloric expenditure. So instead of like just putting food, you can also reduce expenditure and reduce inflammation and systemic stress at the same time. So, combination of those two things. Now, risk versus reward. I mean, if you're talking just in general, then yeah, I think that probably a lot of people do take too high of a risk versus reward ratio, and sometimes it pays off and sometimes it doesn't. But outside of the stress variable, which can be pretty impactful, I tend to manipulate as little as possible. I mean, that's obviously very vague, but I try to manipulate as little as possible and get the desired effect, because doing things like that are extreme and then trying to clean up can be difficult. If you leave yourself enough time, it might not be difficult, like fill and spill and then clean up if you have another day or two left, like that type of thing. But again, like, it depends on your comfort level and depends on how much risk you're willing to take. But yeah, I mean, in general, manipulate as little as possible. And the leaner the person is, the less likely you are to have issues. I mean, a lot of the time it's going to be harder to spill someone that's really, really, really depleted and peeled. I mean, you still can, but it'll take more usually. Next question. Did you always know that you wanted to be in the health and fitness industry? No. Nope. I did not. I was originally going to go into the health industry, which probably would have been physical therapy. At the time, it was a master's degree, and they were just changing it to a PhD. I really had no interest in going to school for that long, honestly. And that was really it. School doesn't bother me really. At the time, I was fine with it. I was used to it. But for the money, I didn't really see the trade-off in terms of how much the career would pay and debt. So now I have no debt at all, and here we are. Of course it could have worked out differently, but I didn't know at the time. Health industry, I guess, yes, but fitness, and I don't know if you would consider physical therapy fitness, but probably not. I did not really know. But you have to remember that at that time, this is not a thing that people were doing. Yes, there were people coaching some. It was very small number compared to what it is now. And the amount of people that were doing it full time as their only source of income was like almost no one. I mean, hardly anyone. And then functional health coaching, like all these things, like none of this existed. So I've been kind of ahead of the curve on a lot of things. So that's, of course, an advantage, but I did not know. Generally speaking, is peanut butter good or bad for gut health? Generally speaking, I don't know, because I don't know what kind of, current status you have in terms of gut health. In a normally functioning, otherwise healthy individual, as long as they don't have a peanut allergy, obviously, that's probably fine. It contains some fiber, nothing too crazy. If we're getting down to nitty gritty, like it's not really a great fatty acid profile in comparison to other nuts. I mean, it's not even a nut, right? It's a legume. So there are better nut butter options if you're really looking to optimize the fatty acid profile that you're using. Is it terrible? Nah, probably not. I can't tell you the last time I really used it, and I don't really put it in people's plans much. If I'm going to use a nut butter, it's like almond butter usually, or we'll do things like walnuts. They have higher omega-3s. Macadamia nuts, they have a pretty good fatty acid profile for the most part. So no, I mean, probably not. It's probably not what I'm going to use if I'm going have someone going through some type of gut health protocol, though. Probably going to choose a better option. But in general, it's probably okay if someone's functioning normally. Why is it that some individuals eating 2K cals and not losing weight then stop dieting and eat 3,500 cal and not gain weight, given all variables are equal besides the calorie increase? First question is like, all variables being equal, are we talking like their training and cardio? I mean, are their NEAT levels equal? Are their movement equal? Like even like sitting in a chair, like bouncing your leg for hours on end if you work a desk job. I mean, that's significant, right? If you're pretty sedentary otherwise. So those are considerations. Also, adaptation. I mean, adaptation can be pretty extreme, and also just the act of increasing calories, especially in the form of carbohydrate and insulin levels moving, can drop cortisol, so systemic stress. So sometimes they may have gained glycogen and fluid in the muscle, but they actually dropped some inflammation and maybe some subcutaneous fluid. So there's a shift, you're just not seeing it, the weight stays the same. That's a consideration, because you see that like in refeeds, for example, like, or diet breaks, right? Increased food, weight stays the same, weight goes down, weight barely moves up, whatever, right? But there is a caloric shift, and you know that they're probably storing more glycogen. So how does that even happen? Even if they weren't gaining any noticeable amount of lean body mass or fat tissue or whatever, how does their weight not move, even though we know that there's like several grams of water per gram of carbohydrate, glycogen, etc.? Well, because a lot of the time cortisol drops, and then they're rinsing off a bunch of systemic stress. And that's the case with a lot of people when they're coming out of a lower calorie situation as well, depending on how poor, what kind of adaptations they've formed. Also, thyroid conversion speeding up, conversion of T4 to T3 speeding up, I mean, there's a lot of things that are playing into that adaptation. It's not just like a matter of the number, right? There are a lot of small variables that are playing into that adaptation. And when someone's extremely adapted, I mean, all those things are gonna upregulate. Definitely possible. Definitely see it often. Have you ever worked with someone with Raynaud's disease? I think that's how you pronounce that. And any specific considerations in nutrition training, or noticed an improvement or response with variables such as stress management, sleep, etc.? First off, yes, I have. Not commonly. That's not something that I see often. However, I have worked with that, and then some various like similar kind of like nervous system type of issues that are more medical, like these are medical issues, right? There is a nervous system component to this, and you can research this too. I mean, we're talking overactive sympathetic nervous system, right? Systemic stress load is going to be huge in managing this. It's going to be huge. And that's probably the biggest lifestyle thing that's, lifestyle variable that we'll be able to control that's going to have a positive outcome for this. With that being said, not doing too much systemically taxing training and sleeping and not being anxious all the time, stuff like that, right? Stuff that we would want to probably do anyhow, but it's just going to be, it's going to be even more important with this type of individual. So nutritionally, there's also a blood flow circulation component to this. So like making sure that we are maintaining good vascular health, good fatty acid profile in the diet, keeping elasticity in there, omega-3s, monounsaturated fats, making sure that we're not insulin resistant, making sure that inflammation is not high. So these things that are going to make sure that the blood vessels are very malleable and can move and can expand and contract. And vascular health is as good as it can be, because there's, the circulatory component to it. And then, again, nervous system component. And that portion's probably the biggest portion that needs to be focused on here, is lowering systemic stress load with these individuals. Last one, why are you so cute? I don't know. Thank my mom for that one. She made me cute. I don't know. It's a blessing and a curse. You just see all the guys in my DMs. That's it, guys. That's it. That's it for this time around. Thank you for the questions, and we will talk to you next time.